Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with a spoiler review for Supergirl, which is in theaters right now. My non-spoiler review came out earlier this week, and a lot of people might think I'm doing this just to kind of dunk on the movie because I didn't really like it that much, but that's not really the case here, and the reason I wanted to do a spoiler review is because if you watch my non-spoiler review, you can tell that there were things that I didn't like about the movie. Some of them I couldn't talk about because they went into plot details, but other things I just couldn't really put my finger on, and it was bothering me a little bit. It's like, what was it about the movie that just didn't quite line up? Because I don't think it's a horrific movie. I think there are actually a lot of parts that do work. So I went to see it again, and it was really kind of like a tinkerer. I guess I'm a film critic's version sometimes of a tinkerer, where if something doesn't work, I want to take it apart, look at the pieces, and figure out why everything didn't come together. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this review. We will be going into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to know what happens, then you should probably click away now. But let's get into Supergirl, some of the things that I think it did right, and a lot of the reasons why it just didn't quite work for me. And quite appropriately, the movie starts with a literal needle drop. Considering how many songs are used in the movie, I guess it was kind of telling the audience what was going on. And I think it makes sense when you look at the history of composers for the movie. Claudia Sarn is the credited composer on the film, but she's the third composer that was hired. Ramin Djawadi was hired in December of last year. Tom Holkenborg, Junkie XL, replaced Ramin Djawadi in February, and then Claudia Sarn was hired to replace him in March. And I know it might be a little weird to start a spoiler review talking about needle drops, but it goes to what I think may have been some of the issues behind the scenes. When you read some of these reports that 15, 20, 25 minutes may have been cut out of the movie, especially for a superhero film where every second of screen time costs money, that seemed unusual to me. And having three different composers and so many needle drops in places where maybe original music might have been, that says to me that perhaps there was a struggle in the post-production process of this movie to find the right tone, to find the right composer, to find the right elements, and that maybe it didn't all come together. And I don't think that these were the results of just what was shot. I think it comes down to a lot of the screenplay as well. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about in this review, is the screenplay of the film, as well as some other things. But when we do talk about the needle drops, I will say I thought most of them were pretty innocuous, kind of reminiscent of what James Gunn did in Guardians of the Galaxy. The one that didn't work for me at all was that cover of the middle. That was basically the climax of the movie. That, combined with the fact that it repeated the Superman thing of let's focus on one character, in this case Ruthie, and slowly pan the camera around her while she watches people fighting. That was just so reminiscent for me of the same beat with Mr. Terrific and Superman. It didn't seem to me like homage or consistency in the style between two different films in a franchise. It just felt like a beat that was repeated. It didn't quite work well the second time. After that needle drop, we meet Kara recovering from a hangover on her ship. So we're basically starting at a middle point with the details that are going to be filled in later. And that can absolutely work. I mean, if a movie is structured correctly and has emotional beats that work once those gaps are filled in, I don't mind starting in the middle. I do think that the flashbacks that we see with Argo City and what happened with Kara and her family there do fill in those gaps. So it's not weird to me that she starts off in such an emotionally vulnerable place. But there are some other issues I have with that material that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Also, and this isn't really a criticism, I guess, it's more of actually a question. The second time through when I was watching the movie, I realized, where did that spaceship come from? It didn't seem like it was her spaceship, and it didn't match anything that we've seen in other movies in the DCU. I'm sure that there's an explanation. That's why I'm not saying that this is a problem with the film, but it was something that I found myself wondering with that second watch. Is I have no idea where this thing came from, because it doesn't seem like anybody else in universe that we've seen has that sort of technology. Like I said, not a criticism, mainly just kind of a question. I'm sure somebody knows the answer. Shortly after meeting Supergirl, we meet Ruthie, who's played by Eve Ridley. And, I don't really have any qualms with Eve Ridley's performance in the movie. I just thought that Ruthie was kind of underwritten. She's basically given the role of Kara's sidekick, a lot of screen time, but she's pretty one note for the size of her character in the script. I thought that her interactions with Kara were mostly, hey, I want to find Krem. No, I'm going alone. Or, hey, I want to kill Krem. And no, you shouldn't do that. There was a deepening of that relationship in some of their third act interactions that we'll talk about, but I think that there was more potential in the scenario of Kara and Ruthie mirroring each other that wasn't exploited in the script. I think the two of them have more in common than the script even wants to admit, and that also kind of ties in directly with some of my major problems, especially with the ending of the film. Speaking of Krem, who Ruthie wants to kill, he was kind of a nothing villain to me. I mean, what can you say about him by the end of the movie? He's really mean. That's about it. The best villains, I think, have dimension. They have motivation. They have some kind of ethos to them beyond I'm just evil and I like to hurt people. Krem reminded me of some of the more forgettable comic book movie villains like Malekith from Thor the Dark World or Steppenwolf from the theatrical cut of Justice League. And I think that one of the ways to prop up a hero, especially a hero appearing in their first movie, is to give them a great villain. I think it's sort of a, rising tide situation. Krem was not a great villain, which in many ways didn't give Supergirl a lot of opportunities to shine. Krem's introduction also had something that I clocked a few times during the movie, which is kind of awkward dialogue introductions to the characters. So Krem shows up and they say, oh, it's the Brigands. It's Krem. He's here to take my life's work. Or when Lobo even shows up, we just have Kara saying, oh, that's Lobo. He's a real wild card. He's a madman. He killed his entire planet. That's telling us when I think that both of those characters would have been served better if they had an introductory scene of their own before jumping into the action where the movie shows us who they are. What is it about these people? And it's, I don't think it's like a Simpsons thing where, well, if there's a scene without Supergirl, then the audience is going to be asking, hey, where's Supergirl? I think that it's important to the movie to establish those characters on their own terms, not just through expository lines of dialogue, but through showing us through their actions what they're all about. That strengthens the whole movie. And I think that you could have strengthened the characters of both Krem and Lobo, who are just kind of there in the movie, by putting some more ties directly between the two of them. I think there's an opportunity to do that in the movie. As it stands, Lobo is out to get the bounty on one of the other brigands who we don't really know and never really know in the movie, so he pops up from time to time, but his goal isn't really connected in any way to what Kara and Ruthie are doing. But if Lobo had been after Krem to collect a bounty on him, then not only would it make sense that he's always where Kara and Ruthie are, but it would set their goals in direct opposition. Ruthie wants to kill Krem. Let's say Lobo needs him alive for the bounty. You set up tension between our heroes, our anti-hero Lobo, and our villain Krem with, I think, some very minimal rewriting. One of the main criticisms, at least for me, of Lobo's character is that while Jason Momoa is great in the role, he's just sort of jammed into the movie. And if you tightened the relationship between the four main characters, then I think that the movie itself would have had a lot more depth, and it could have potentially solved some problems with the ending, which I am going to get to. We're kind of going in chronological order here. So Kara doesn't want to go with Ruthie to find Krem, but her hand is forced when he poisons Krypto. And I've got to say, it's an odd choice to take the breakout character apart from Superman himself from the last movie and basically write him out of the sequel, or at least the follow-up film. And it's also pretty cheap stakes. I mean, not a soul believed that Krypto was actually going to die in the movie. And it even allows for a literal ticking clock. Again, with a deeper character relationship between Kara and Ruthie, especially if you add some dimension to Ruthie's character, you could have had the two of them go after Krem on their own with just the motivation of Kara saying, I'm going with you so that you don't ruin your life and kill Krem. You could leave Krypto behind if you want to. It could be, hey, listen, buddy, it's going to be too dangerous, so I'm, going to leave you with people I trust here or something like that. If you really want to write Krypto out of the movie, but we have basically two characters with two different motivations that kind of come in conflict with each other. But the problem is that Kara's motivation never has any suspense behind it. We don't know if Ruthie is going to kill Krem or if she's not going to kill Krem, but we absolutely know that Kara is going to be able to save Krypto. People would literally burn the theaters down if Krypto died in this movie. Then we get to the interplanetary bus scene, which features one of several fight scenes where Supergirl is either depowered or weakened. And listen, the bar at the beginning, that makes sense. She's there to drink and not fight. There's a red sun. The bus, okay, they're in transit. They're close to a yellow sun, but it's not quite there yet. It does give us one of the many scenes in this movie where Supergirl gets a recharge in the sunlight. Then Supergirl gets poisoned and weakened. Yeah, okay, fine. Then she gets taken to the yellow sun, green sun planet, which I thought looked really cool. I was willing to roll with that. And then that's capped off with her triumphant entry in the Supergirl suit, fully powered, until she's shot with kryptonite arrows by Krem. And that to me was just like, okay, this is too much. We even get like a third or fourth sun recharging scene after that, and that arrow thing doesn't really pay off. The only thing that it does is give us some false stakes that Supergirl might die, which again is not going to happen, followed by Lobo coming in to save the day, seemingly randomly. I guess he gets his bounty, and he's like, oh, okay, and by the way, I'm going to save Supergirl. It just didn't add much to the movie, and I thought it detracted from the stakes a lot when you're once again depowering Supergirl in the climax, in the finale of your film. And this was something that happened in Superman a lot as well. Last year's Superman. It starts with him like literally beaten and bloodied in the snow. Then he loses his powers in the pocket dimension, or whatever you want to call that thing. The engineer almost kills him. Ultraman almost beats him. It really makes me worry that under James Gunn, the DCU struggles with how to do storytelling with incredibly powerful characters without weakening them. And to be fair, this is the kind of beat that the Christopher Reeve Superman movies had once a movie. You had Kryptonite in the first one. He gives up his powers in the second one. He's corrupted in the third one. The Nuclear Man nail scratch in the fourth one. But even by that fourth Superman movie, it was growing stale. The Green Sun, for me, was my favorite beat, showing Kara losing her powers. It was unexpected. It was very impactful. And if that had been the major beat of her being weakened, apart from being under the red sun at the beginning, I think it would have had more impact instead of being just one in a succession of times. The bus sequence actually ended with what I thought was the best example of how Kara and Clark are so different when she uses her heat vision to interrogate the pirate threatening to kill her. That's what I think the movie could have used more of. Not just Kara saying Superman sees the good and I see the truth, but more of Supergirl's hard edge and her willingness to cross lines, and that plays into my feelings about the ending, which again we'll get to later. So then we have the introduction of Lobo and the bar fight, and before Kara's betrayal by the bar owners, we get a flashback sequence to Argo City. Now, I've said that Supergirl, I don't think needed to be a full origin story, but her childhood and her departure from her home are critical to who she is, and it felt like we kind of got the last season on Supergirl recap of those events. I think we especially needed more of Kara's relationship with her parents because they are the ones that imparted to her the messages that she carried with her for the rest of her life. Her dad says that she needs to use her powers to protect the weak. Her mom says that she has to be good. That doesn't mean she can't be tough. It doesn't mean she has to be kind, but she has to be good. And it plays directly into the conclusion of the film. I mean, it's foundational, but it seemed to have been boiled down to a few key lines of dialogue because it was in the movie with so much other stuff. Also, after Superman came out last summer, I know that there were a lot of people that were convinced that the whole Jor-El sent Superman to conquer Earth was a misdirect and that it was going to be retconned in future movies, even after James Gunn said it wasn't going to be retconned. But it was confirmed again when they're fleeing Krypton and the escape pod for Kal-El flies overhead and Kara's mother says, oh, that's Jor-El's son, the one that he says is going to be a conqueror of worlds. That was obviously the intention. That was the actual intention of Jor-El, for Superman to come to Earth, rule over it as a god, and conquer it. And I think that people are just going to have to realize that this is how they're choosing to tell Superman's story in the DCU. There's not going to be a retcon unless, I mean, at this point, you would have to really, really do something unbelievable to retcon that. So then they have that big brawl with the brigands, and Kara stops Ruthie from killing Krem, and they get in an argument and split up, and Kara ends up on the Green Sun, Yellow Sun planet, and this was something I was actually looking forward to in the third act. I thought it could have added an actually suspenseful ticking clock, not the one to where Krypto is not going to die, but when you have a sun that sets and a sun that rises, I thought that Supergirl was going to be like really forced to fix this situation before the Green Sun came up again. I mean, that is a suspenseful situation, and it was right there for the movie to take advantage of, but they chose not to. When the Green Sun does rise, though, after Kara arrives, she's immediately rescued by Ruthie, who's stowed away off-screen and immediately makes up with Kara a few minutes after them getting to an argument by saying the same words about her that her mother said, which is to be not nice but kind, not perfect but good. And Ruthie also grabbed Kara's suit off-screen and brought it with her for some reason, which we see in a flashback Clark gave her as a reminder to humanity that he and Supergirl are good. That's what the Supergirl suit represents. That's what the movie says it represents, and Kara putting it back on should signal a change or an evolution in her character. And that's where I have most of my issues with the movie. I think in the end especially, it becomes very thematically muddled. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to go back and see it a second time, because I wanted to more closely track the evolution of both Ruthie and Kara, thinking maybe there was something there that I missed. And I kind of came out with more questions than I came in with. So Kara and Ruthie are kind of mirrors to each other, whether the script says they are or not. Both of them have lost their families and their home, although not their entire planet in Ruthie's case. And Kara's main goal is to not let Ruthie kill Krim, because it won't fix her pain and it'll haunt her forever. She doesn't want Ruthie's life to be consumed by a guilt that will never go away. And this is actually similar to the dynamic that we saw way back in Batman Forever between Batman and Robin. Robin wants to kill Two-Face because Two-Face killed his parents, and Batman says, no, you can't do that, because if you do, it's not going to solve anything. It's just going to make things worse.
You make the kill, but your pain doesn't die with Harvey, it grows. So you run out into the night to find another face, and another. Until one terrible morning you wake up and realize that revenge has become your whole life.
But there's a key difference there. In Batman Forever, Batman, Bruce Wayne, is telling Robin this because he has actually done the vengeance thing. In universe, even though it's a different actor, he killed the Joker. He killed the person responsible for murdering his parents, and he speaks from experience when he says, it doesn't solve anything, so don't do it. Kara, from what we've seen, hasn't done that. She warns Ruthie against killing Krim because it's not going to take the pain away, as if she has gone through some kind of an experience where she has sought vengeance as a way to heal her pain. But we haven't seen that actually occur. Ruthie shares the same trauma in many ways as Kara, so Kara can't shield her from that. And it feels to me as if the story somehow skipped a beat where Kara has experienced the emptiness that comes from vengeance. However, even if you set that aside, Kara's appearance in the Supergirl suit should symbolize a new beginning, that she's had a realization that's allowed her to become the embodiment of good by her own choice. She's not wearing the suit because Superman tells her to. She's wearing it because she chooses to. I mean, this is classic comic book stuff. It's indicative of a change in her character. But I didn't really see any difference in Kara from before she put on the suit and after she put on the suit. She fights the same. She takes the vengeance that she advised Ruthie not to take. If she had had an attitude, for example, earlier on when they're fighting the brigands, where the young girls that were being held captive were in trouble, and Supergirl refused to help them and said, I'm not here to rescue people, I'm here to save my dog, then her rescuing them in the third act would be indicative of a change in her perspective or a change in her character. But she was saving those girls in Act 2 as well, so there's not really much of a change there. The biggest change in Kara's perspective really seems to be at the end when she says, I'm going to stop running away and I'm going to return to Earth. But I don't think that that change is motivated by what we just saw a few minutes earlier. And that all hinges around her decision to kill Krim. After sending Ruthie away, she stabs him once for hurting her dog and again for hurting either Ruthie or the bar owner's daughter. There's no hesitation. There's seemingly no guilt. And that to me symbolizes a character who hasn't changed. And let me be clear, I think that route is fine if that's the route that you want to take. If you want to take Supergirl down the road of, I've helped you avoid this pitfall, but it's too late for me. And I've kind of, fallen on my sword, no pun intended, in order to keep you from this kind of life. That's okay, but I don't think it matches the ending that we get where Kara returns back to Earth and says, okay, I'm ready to make a home here and to settle here, and essentially to stop running from the pain and grief and trauma of her past after taking an action that she's just spent an entire movie saying you're not going to be able to overcome. There's even a beat during that final fight where one of the girls who was held captive kills one of the brigands, and Kara looks at her and kind of, not in a disapproving or sad way, but kind of says like, yeah, you did it. You got yours. Where's the line drawn between where killing is something that sends you on an unavoidable road to a lifetime of pain and tragedy and where killing is comeuppance for something that someone has done to you? That seems to be the mentality that Kara has. That's what she does to Krim. And it seems to be the mentality that she's showing when that prisoner, when that young girl shoots one of the brigands, but it's not the same thing when it comes to Ruthie. The script treats Ruthie as if she has an innocence that she doesn't have. I mean, there is no protecting her from being traumatized. That's already happened. She saw her entire family slaughtered in front of her. Whether she kills Krim or she doesn't, she is going to be traumatized by that. So because they already share so much in common, what Kara does at the end doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And this is what I mean when I say that I feel like Supergirl is a sequel to a movie that we didn't get, because it feels like there's information about Kara that would potentially inform her decision at the end that we just don't have.
I think that there should have been a movie before this one. Not a full origin story, but a movie that does include more of Kara's past on Argo City, that includes more of her time on Earth, that features a lot more tension between her and Superman. And ultimately, I think it would include an act that she takes, namely killing someone that leaves her riddled with guilt and fleeing Earth to drink the pain away. Yes, this would require a lot more of David Cornsweet's time. It would probably mean a second Superman movie would have to be pushed back a year or two, but I think that it would fill out Kara's story, and it would give us a much bigger reason to invest in a solo Supergirl movie, not just a 30-second cameo a year ago, but a full movie where we meet her character, we understand her conflicts, and her solo movie is the consequences of those actions. And if that vengeance had made her feel like she wasn't worthy of being good, of wearing that symbol of being good, then her decision to put that suit back on in the third act would carry a lot more weight. And even if we did have that movie, again, thematically, with where we end up in this movie, I don't think that Kara's decision to kill Krim makes a whole lot of sense, which is also where I bring back the idea of incorporating Lobo into this story. If Lobo is after Krim instead of a random brigand, then we could still have the same ending, where Kara talks Ruthie out of killing Krim, then makes a conscious decision on her part not to kill him, which would symbolize healing, but Krim could maybe mock her for not killing him, and she could respond, well, I'm not going to kill you, but he might. And then she turns him over to Lobo, who is delighted to have Krim as a prisoner. Now, I'm not saying that this is what the movie should have done. I'm not a professional screenwriter, but this is the result of me just kind of sitting around for 10, 15 minutes ballparking some ideas. And it's hard for me to believe that at no point in the process did anybody say, hey, this doesn't really seem to line up for me. If Kara's actions at the end do match with the character that they're setting up at the beginning of the movie, then at a minimum, I don't think that the movie does a great job of telling us why Kara at the end would take this action versus what she's telling Ruthie in the rest of the movie versus where she is at the end of this movie, having happy fun time with Superman. Bottom line, I think that you can have a movie where Kara decides to kill Krim and kind of goes down a darker path and says, I work best alone and I'm already outrunning my grief and my pain and my trauma. And instead of trying to figure out how to fix that, I'm just going to accept it. Or I think you can have a movie where Supergirl says, I'm not going to kill Krim, and goes home to Superman and says, okay, I've been dealing with a lot of stuff, but I feel like I've turned a corner. I understand what it means to wear this symbol of being good. I've incorporated what my parents told me about being good. I've experienced it through this experience with Ruthie, and now I'm ready to heal and make Earth my home. But I don't think that you can mix and match those two endings. It just doesn't hit the right note for me. It may be different for you, but tonally and thematically, it just didn't work for me. And it's a shame because Millie Alcock does a really good job playing the flawed, haunted hero, and I think that she does the best with the script that she has. I mean, Anna Nogueira said in interviews that Millie Alcock was all for killing Krim, that she said that that's what Supergirl had to do. But when the thematic crux of a film just doesn't make sense to me, that means that the movie doesn't really work for me either. But one of the things that I don't really understand about the movie is that James Gunn was really publicly hyping up the screenplay for this film. I mean, he said it was so incredible that they moved Supergirl up and made it earlier because it was the best script, one of the best scripts that he'd ever read. And, he may agree with what Supergirl does at the end, thematically, all that stuff. He may not have those problems. Some other people probably don't have those problems. But there are other things in the screenplay, like incorporating Lobo more closely into the story, that seem pretty basic to me, that I'm surprised weren't addressed, especially for a screenplay that, again, James Gunn was apparently absolutely in love with. And to me, that leaves three possibilities. Number one, nobody flagged any of those issues, which, again, maybe some of them are matters of preference, but I think that there are some pretty basic storytelling things that should have been addressed at some point. Number two, maybe the original screenplay did address those issues or didn't have those issues at all, but the screenplay was rewritten kind of by committee and changed such that those issues were created. Or number three, the longer version of this film, the film that had the 15 or 20 or 25 extra minutes in it, addressed those issues, and they were holes that were opened up during the editing process, again, sort of by committee. And I think that any one of those three scenarios is troubling for DC, because even if you don't agree with any of my thoughts and criticisms on the movie, and I acknowledge that that's very much a possibility. There's obviously something that is not connecting with a lot of people with this film. I mean, the reviews have been, I would say, mediocre at best. A lot of them very negative. The cinema score came out last night. It was a B-. That is not great for a superhero film. The Rotten Tomatoes verified audience score is sitting around 75%. That is lower than movies like Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom. And there are some other factors that could be at play there, but there are also many other factors that I think acknowledge that something about this film is not connecting with audiences in the way that James Gunn apparently thought when he read the screenplay. And finding that disconnect, I think, has to be a priority for DC Studios, even if it's none of the things that I mentioned in this video, because DC right now is at a very critical time. Obviously, with Warner Brothers, the potential merger with Paramount, there are going to be decisions that are made about the future of DC Studios, maybe the future of James Gunn's job. And I think that it's critical for a creative, for the head of a studio, whether you agree with it or not, to explore what about the movies they're making is not connecting with audiences and figure out how to repair that disconnection. That doesn't mean that you have to dumb anything down or make a lowest common denominator version of the movies that you want to make, but I do think it's important to look at how your audiences are receiving the film. The best superhero movies, the ones that have worked the best, and I don't just mean at the box office, I also mean with reviews, etc. Movies like Wonder Woman and the first Iron Man movie have been able to tell very deeply resonant character stories, stories with arcs, stories that you can track, stories about redemption, stories about flawed people that become good, stories about perfect people that understand humanity's flaws. There's a way to work in the thematic areas that Supergirl is working in where it doesn't seem as muddled, or where you can make it a little bit more clear how you ended up where you did. And at this juncture, I think it's very critical for DC to find those solutions. So those are my spoiler thoughts on Supergirl. What did you think of the movie? Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree with all of them? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, stay tuned right here for the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.